this episode, I talk all things Exorcist and William Friedkin with my good friend Jessie Bones. We take a deep dive into The Exorcist and also touch on some other super dark topics. So, hope you dig this episode. After you are done with this episode, make sure you check out my fellow horsemen of the podcast Apocalypse, Everything Went Black podcast, Into the Necrosphere, the Necromaniacs podcast, Spitball Media, Iblis Manifestations, and the Soul Knocks podcast. Also, something that's a bit more recent, I have a merch store up now on Teespring. So you can enter the code HORRORWOLF at checkout right now. All capital, HORRORWOLF at checkout, and get 25% off until the end of the Halloween season. So all the way till, I think, November 2nd or so, I'm going to have that discount up there. So that's at the HORRORWOLF666 podcast.creatorspring.com. If you want to get like some HORRORWOLF mugs, t-shirts, sweatshirts, whatever. I have a bunch of stuff on there, so that would greatly help me out with the podcast and be much appreciated. So, and also, if you dig what you hear, leave a rating on whatever podcast service you use. That also helps out a ton, and it's much appreciated. So, thanks so much, and enjoy this episode.
So, what an excellent day for an exorcism.
Right? I'm telling you. This was a good choice, too, for doing Exorcist, because I just did a rewatch today, actually. I haven't seen Exorcist in probably, I would say probably 2 years now. I usually watch every year during Halloween or whatever, but it's been, I missed a couple of years, but man, it still hits me just as hard as it ever did, from the first time seeing it. It's so fucking, I don't know, it just fucking hits you. It's so dark, and it's still like one of my all-time favorite horror movies.
Same. I mean, and it's funny too, because another thing I thought we could talk about as well, just because like one of the things, one of the things that I'd done kind of after, hearing that William Friedkin passed away was I read, there's a book called that I highly recommend just because it was a really fun read, very interesting, some inside information. Mm-hmm. The Exorcist Legacy, 50 Years of Fear by Nat Sigaloff.
Oh, nice.
It was really cool. But yeah, it's like a very in-depth look at, obviously The Exorcist as a film itself, but also Friedkin and all that. But yeah, I also wanted to, if you don't mind, read Daniel Noah's post.
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah, that'd be fine.
One of the things that struck me too is that, how anytime like, a horror titan passes away, or we'll just say like a phenomenal director, just kind of in general, right? Everybody talks about, their experiences with them and that kind of thing. But one of the things that kind of struck me about Friedkin was just like the love that all these people had for him and how kind and open he was, which I've been in Hollywood. It's not, right. That's not necessarily, I would say, the norm. I think it is the norm depending on the circle that you choose to hang out in. But it can be a seedy place. And to be quite frank, it kind of scares me sometimes, and it's hard to figure out who you can trust. So I thought him being as open with so many people as he was just kind of great. But I'll read Daniel Noah's post, producer from SpectreVision, also a writer. Not long after we started the company, we got it in our heads to approach one of our all-time favorite filmmakers, William Friedkin, to direct a movie for us. But how? We soon learned that he would be hosting a tribute screening of the TCM at the Vista. So we decided on an ambush. We plotted... I just love the idea of SpectreVision ambushing William Friedkin. Right. We plotted out exactly what each of us would say, running lines like members of a high school drama club. Driving to the event that night, we were like nervous 12-year-olds, total dorks. Completely valid emotions, just saying.
Right, totally.
We entered the venue and immediately spotted him holding court with his booming voice and grand gesticulations. But before we could hatch our plan, he walked straight up to us with his arms outstretched and shouted, "SpectreVision!" He knew all about our company and what we were doing. I think it's great. Friedkin. We never got to run through our routine because he suggested that we work on a project together. While we never got that project off the ground, we had a series of beautiful lunches during which Billy asked us dozens of questions and regaled us with war stories. He was kind, curious, supportive, generous, and deeply passionate about film. He was also one of the greatest filmmakers who ever lived. Billy Friedrich, rest in peace. Daniel Noah, Los Angeles, California, August 7th, 2023. I thought that was really cool. And to be honest with you, like everything about SpectreVision, I would say, very much embodies that outstretched arms. You know what I mean? So yeah. I thought that was very sweet, and that's definitely one of the ones I wanted to read. Other definitely notable mentions was like the outpouring of love from Guillermo del Toro to Friedrich. So yeah, it's just what a cool person, you know. So let's talk about one of his most horrifying films.
Yeah, until like I was saying, till this day, like it's still one of my favorite all-time horror movies, and it still hits just as hard as it did the first time I seen it. So, and that's The Exorcist.
Yes, 1973 was when that was released, and it was kind of the first of its kind in terms of. I mean, it later got inducted into the Hall of Fame, Horror Hall of Fame, in 1991, I believe. And I had a couple, let's see, quotes. And this one was interesting to me because I think it's interesting. Some of my favorite horror directors really do not like to be referred to as that, interestingly enough. And there's part of me that understands, especially some of the ones from like generations prior to myself. Let's see. This is a quote from Friedrich. With The Exorcist, we said what we wanted to say. Neither one of us view it as a horror film. We view it as a film about mysteries of faith. It's easier for people to call it a horror film or a great horror film or the greatest horror film ever made. Whenever I see that, I feel a great distance from it. And he is not the first director I've heard kind of very forcefully say that. Elias Marriage, director of Begotten, Shadow of the Vampire, like I've definitely heard that very vehemently from him as well. And I think it's just kind of, I respect it completely. I also just think it's like a misunderstanding, like a perpetuation, a little bit of like the misunderstanding of the horror genre, because, you know, when I think of it, like I never think of it as just like this like goofy slasher franchise, right? It has more so to do with, you know, grief and just very profound feelings of darkness that every single person has. And it's just like a wonderful way, like artful way to express those things and to make us all feel connected on a very deeper level. So, I mean, and that's definitely what he did with The Exorcist, as scary as it was.
Yeah, totally. And I've heard that before too, about him not really accepting it as a horror movie. I do, and I know a lot of folks do, and I know there's some folks that don't, but I definitely see it as a horror movie, but I can also see where he was coming from as well, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, so he was the son, I believe, of two Jewish immigrants from Ukraine. His mom was a nurse, and he has kind of like a complicated relationship with his father, from what I understand, which ironically is kind of like incredibly evident in The Exorcist, because father's absent. He makes that very well known. And then just the very strong bond and like relationship between Chris McNeil and Reagan.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a very visceral theme throughout it, is just like the mother's desperation to save her kid. So, and I think that's the thing, obviously, that ties everyone together. And then you can get into, which I think, you know, we can definitely, because unfortunately I have a sibling who had an exorcism.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, Brandon. I grew up Southern Baptist.
Well, my parents were Baptists and stuff, but we never attended church and all that shit. Only thing I ever remember, like religious wise, is I did a vacation Bible school one year, and I don't remember shit about any of the religious shit. I just remember the teacher's breath smelled like death, and then we ate cookies and drank like some kind of like Gatorade or some shit like that. But I don't remember any kind of religious anything, because we acted up the whole time we were there. I was probably like maybe 10 or something, but besides that, we never had to go to church and all that shit. So they say they're Baptist. My parents do. I don't I don't know what they are really. I've never been baptized or anything like that. So
Okay, Brandon. So my dad was a pastor. I was in vacation Bible school every single summer. I went to church on Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, and sometimes Sunday nights. Yeah. So I'm slightly jealous of your upbringing. I wish that my parents sometimes would have just been like, yeah, we're Southern Baptists, and then never did anything to make that evident.
right.
It's weird too, because I have some positive memories of faith-based things on occasion, just from like, I say this in a way, like I know a lot of people listening may possibly still be religious, so please understand I'm not insulting you. This is my own experience, but the innocence of stupidity is something that I definitely on occasion miss, as somebody who's painfully too aware of their surroundings. I think everybody kind of experiences that just as they like age in general, but it happens on like a different level if you grew up like intensely spiritual. And I basically, in my opinion, when it comes to like these very fundamental religions, basically kind of indoctrinated, right?
Right.
Because I didn't get a chance to think anything of the world before I was, plopped into Sunday school and taught, the fundamentals of, Southern Baptist and our situation, but like same thing with like Catholics or very Orthodox Jewish or very, conservative Muslim, like whatever your fundamentalist upbringing was that can kind of traumatize you a little bit. And I have friends from all walks, all faiths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here with that too. I know a lot of people with different faiths and beliefs and stuff.
I called my brother because here's the thing about like the exorcism that happened with us. And it's ironic because it's similar in the sense that, so here's the thing. Every modern exorcism is going to be probably performed on a mentally ill person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a sibling who I have permission from both of them to speak of this, just so everybody is aware. I have a sibling who is bipolar and schizoaffective is the formal diagnosis. He is in a state hospital. At this point in time in our lives, he was not, but he was not doing very well. He was unmedicated at the time and kind of started acting out in a way that freaked and it's always a step parent, I swear to God, freaked my step parent out, who was very fundamental religious. Her background was Mormon, now Southern Baptist. And here's the funny thing too, is like my dad was a pastor and my dad was like, this is not demon possession. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
My stepmom wouldn't listen. She called somebody to the house that, for all intents and purposes, like just from this is my opinion, just a loudmouth, pious man who thought he knew better than everybody else. So he came to the house and performed an exorcism on my brother, where my other two little brothers were in the home. So the middle brother linebackered the baby brother into a back bedroom because like he had the presence of mind to be like, this is going to be very scary for a child to be around. So they were hiding in their bedroom watching Ratatouille. And Isaac was like, the volume was not going up loud enough. But and it was interesting listening to him because I think loss of faith plays like a huge theme throughout like The Exorcist, because the priest psychiatrist is like multiple times mentions that he's losing his faith or has lost his faith.
Yeah.
So Isaac was telling me that he was at this time during this moment, he was still a believer. And he was very, very scared, even though he's trying to protect the little one. And he said, like, I was like in my head, he was like, I was always told that when you cry out to Jesus, like a warmth spreads in your chest and he's there for you. And he was like, none of that happened for a single second. I was terrified the whole time. No one came to save me. So it was kind of not so dramatic in the sense that, oh, my faith in Jesus, it's dead. But it was kind of like the catalyst for like, I don't think this is real. Mm-hmm. And then later on, when my, mentally ill brother admitted that he definitely faked it, he it just kind of became solidified in his head and put that thought in his head of just because it feels real doesn't mean it is. And that was triggered by him saying that. So, and here's the thing, is this like, we grew up watching horror movies as kids together. I definitely think that even though my brother, the one that got the exorcism, was not doing well at the time, to be honest with you, he completely used that scenario just to make this person that came and do the exorcism look like a complete idiot. And he succeeded. He was definitely just like, I know how to make demon noises. So he, he very much played into it just because he could. So I just think it's interesting sometimes, what we're willing to just kind of like fall into in terms of realism. And I think real life is like much more terrifying than anything that you could see on a screen. But I just, I think people of faith in particular responded so viscerally to The Exorcist because of those things, and because we have those like secret traumas, even if we don't believe anymore.
Right. No, it's totally true. That's scary stuff too. Like sending an exorcist down to, try to help your brother out who's, legitimately sick and stuff, and that's scary, because what they're doing there is archaic and doesn't make any sense to me or
for
any
sure.
other, like, it's just like that's put them in that much more danger and stuff. That's a mental fuck right there.
Oh, exactly. And it's just like, and to this day, to be totally honest with you, because at the time, we were all still close as siblings, but we were split up. I lived with my mom, and I, to this day, kind of beat myself up for not being there. Obviously, I could not. How could you have known? Right.
Right.
At the same time, I'm just like, I can tell you for a fact that would not have happened had I been there. And it's just like, thinking about now, like I work, here and there with mentally ill patients. It's just like, it's so obvious when you're seeing somebody going through a heavily induced manic state, and it's just, he was suffering, right? And he needed a psychiatrist. He did not need some idiot to come to the house and start screaming at him in Latin. Right. So it's fascinating to me too. Like, one of the other aspects of this that I was kind of joking with my brother about was that when this person came to the house, he pushed my dad aside to do this quote unquote exorcism. He had a Bible, sure, but he pushed past a person that had graduated from seminary to step in himself and perform an exorcism. And I just like regardless of whether you believe or not, the overwhelming, just spit in your face arrogance of that was just astonishing. And it kind of still is. And I'm going to say this with everybody, take this with a grain of salt, because what actually happened is very explainable by medical science. But a month after this man performed this exorcism on my brother, he died.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That was weird. We were all just kind of like, fascinating. Okay. So,
yeah.
But yeah, and it's just, it kind of brings up, just things that, you think you get over, or things that you think you put aside. Like, there was always this verse that my parents would quote to me. It was Ephesians 6:12, which is, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." So, and kind of what that basically means is like, your struggle is not with like, kind of like what it translates to basically, like if you're going to get like very gritty with that verse, is your struggle is not with reality, but it's with prayer and for the souls of the unbelievers. So, yeah, it's just, those are the verses, and those are like the concepts that you grow up from a very young age within your head. So if you're a person that has those things in your head since you were a child, and this is very real to you, whether you're a believer currently or you're somebody who is a recovering believer, a movie like The Exorcist would rip your psyche apart. So hats off to Friedrich for that. And I think that that's definitely one of the reasons why it slammed so hard.
Yeah. Speaking of like, so traumatizing, like older people, my dad, I let him borrow like the DVD of this many years ago. And this scared the shit out of him when he was a kid. He saw it in the movie theaters and stuff. But I let him borrow the DVD and stuff, and he didn't make it all the way through the film. He's like, I was watching this and I heard something fall in the other room, so I went in and turned it off. I'm good.
Right. And that's
And
and the other thing that just makes that so sad too, and I think I talked about this with Jim Perry on the podcast I did with him, but sometimes when you grow up in a fundamental religion, one of the things that it does is it kind of damages your relationship to any type of spiritual world outside of fundamentalism, right?
mhm,
So rather than like you feel or see something that could be attributed to like a ghostly presence, right?
mhm,
The curiosity in you is kind of kept prisoner by the fear surrounding it, thinking it's demonic or like something nefarious. Whereas I've had a lot of friends who have had ghost experiences who didn't grow up that way, and that's not their automatic assumption, which I think is so cool. Like it took me so long to get to a point where, I could talk myself off a ledge and just be like, there's spiritual things that don't necessarily mean one thing or another. They're just there.
right.
And the fact that they're there is kind of cool, but the like malignant part of it may not be. And yeah, it took me so long, like just trying to talk myself off a ledge. My first, spiritual / ghost experience was very scary for me, I think, based on a lot of those things.
Yeah, and like I said, things can be like the paranormal stuff doesn't have to be demonic or angelic or whatever. Like it can, we're all energy. We're made up of energy and other things and stuff like that. And I think we leave things behind, or who knows? Look at it from another angle too. Maybe there's more than one dimension. Maybe these are things from other dimensions, like kind of coming
Completely
ours.
true. Yes.
Yeah, I mean these are all kind of science-based things, So
Yeah, completely true. And then another thing that we were kind of talking about too, just because, when I first had like, this, and I think for me as a woman, it was different than maybe for my brother a little bit, because like when I came out of and I just kind of discarded my belief system, I was very angry. And a lot of it has to do with like when you grow up in a fundamentalist religion as a female, a lot of
mm,
like your femininity is completely sexualized and demonized in a way that's just kind of scarring for like, you as a person, right?
mm,
So I came out of it just kind of like kicking and screaming, very angry. I was a very dogmatic atheist. I was quite offensive as a person. And
mhm.
looking back on that now, I think I have a lot more compassion for like, like the stereotypical, like an atheist wearing a fedora on their soapbox.
Right.
I think we are like, ew, that guy's crazy. But I have so much compassion just in the sense where I'm just like, I know that something happened to you spiritually when you were younger. And this is just like an extreme response to, basically being spiritually abused when you were young.
Mhm.
So, but now it's just more so one of those things. I'm a very open person, much like Friedrich. He described himself, even though he was raised Jewish, I think he later began describing himself as agnostic, and I'm very much the same way. I have an openness to things, but I'm also terrified of charlatans, and I'm also
Mhm.
terrified of belittling somebody. And I think everybody, if you're going to criticize a belief system or a religion, you need to be so careful to criticize just the belief itself and not the people.
Right.
Kind of the same thing with like Catholicism. Like Catholics are wonderful, warm human beings. I've known many of them. But the organization, that they are under is a very different thing. And I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
another funny juxtaposition when you talk about good and evil. Just like Catholic imagery has always been kind of frightening to me.
Yeah.
They're wildly guilty of like horrifically abusing children. So it's just like, like what are we talking about evil? Because that's a lot more scary than, the idea of demon possession sometimes.
Yeah, that's true evil. That's real evil.
Have you
Horrifying.
ever read like the Exorcist book by William Peter Blatty?
I have. I did that one, and I read. I believe the second one was. I think the second book was called Legion. I know. That's what they wanted
Yes.
to name the third film, but I think the second book. I read both the first and second. I enjoyed both of them.
I was watching, so last night I was watching it with a bunch of my girlfriends because they were kind enough to like come have a horror party, and we ate popcorn while I took notes. And there was that in the very beginning with this Pazuzu statue. They were just
Mhm.
like, "Who is that?" And then we were just having a fun time like talking about that because I was like, I think it's based on real things, but the Pazuzu himself, like Demon of Wind, I think it is like a William Peter Blatty creation. So he's not actually a real, well, I mean, define real when it comes to mythology, but that's not like a historical anything. That's just something out of his genius brain.
Yeah, I think it's described the Pazuzu as kind of like the demon of all demons. He's like the lord of demons, pretty much.
Yeah, which would kind of make sense when you have like, like, um, because interestingly enough, like, I think in the Bible, like, um, Satan being cast out of hell, like in the beginning, was like his greatest crime was trying to be like Jesus himself.
Hmm.
So that's why he became like the fallen angel or whatever. But him, when they're talking about like needing sufficient evidence to give to a bishop or the Vatican or whatever to proceed with an exorcism, um, I thought it was funny. I was like, but it's claiming to be the devil himself. And I was just like, well, wouldn't you if you were also an arrogant monster like demons?
Right.
Right. So I think it's just, I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool. That just kind of reminded me of, you know, regardless of whether you see like God as like, God is not a demon, but it's like, it's all these deities like proclaiming to be the most powerful. So of course, I feel like he would probably say something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Pazuzu, in the Wikipedia on Pazuzu or whatever, he's a ancient Mesopotamian personification of the southern wind. He's held kingship over the Lu wind demon, so he's like the leader of the wind demons and stuff. But so he's pretty old. He's definitely ancient.
Right. That's that's fun. I love when like somebody does such a good job at creating something that you're like, I literally don't even know if that's historical or not.
Yeah.
uh, um, and then the other quote by Friedrich, and this kind of goes back to like the one that I read a little bit earlier, where he says, I didn't set out to scare the hell out of people as you do with a horror film. I set out to make a film that would make them think about the concept of good and evil. And again, like we mentioned, I know a lot of horror directors kind of have this like little aversion, right, to being referred to as like, just the blanket statement of horror. But I mean, making somebody wrestle with the concept of good and evil that's horror, and
Right.
I think people in our generation, when it comes to companies like Spectrovision, A24, trying to just broaden the concept and like get like very deep and affect you so viscerally, I think like, that's, to me, that's what horror means. So I definitely think that um, a lot of like these older directors that are just kind of have like an aversion to that title, I think they just kind of misunderstand what we mean when we say that.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Sorry, I'm going through notes. Um, the music to The Exorcist, it's very similar to Halloween in the sense that it like makes my heart flutter in a
Hmm.
very positive way. It's somehow, I know it's supposed to be scary, but it just makes me feel warm and happy.
Right. Yeah, same here. Yeah. It's just like the Halloween music. I'm like, all right, this is cool. Like fucking iconic music, And yeah, it kind of, I know, empowers me a bit for some odd reason. I don't know. Maybe just because of the love for both of those films, and other, Halloween franchise and, The Exorcist. So.
Yeah, no, it's just I couldn't explain it. We were watching it last night, and the second that like iconic little piano thing started, I was like, I'm home. And you know what's funny? So tell me how you feel about this, because I think I maybe should have gone a little bit more into the symbology when it comes to, or the symbolism when it comes to the Ouija board. However, interestingly enough, like the connection I was kind of missing on that. Are we thinking that that was like the connection to Pazuzu?
The Ouija board.
Yeah.
I want to say it was like a gateway for him to get in. I think Zuzu was just kind of out there floating around waiting to, find a good host and stuff. And I think, finding that Ouija board was like his way of just getting into her,
Okay,
because
cool.
from what I've come to find out from my research and, seen this film a bunch and everything, I think Zuzu's main target wasn't really Regan or whatever. It was the priest.
The priest,
It was
yes.
Father Karras. That's who he really wanted to get to in the end. So it's like, all right, now I got a way to get here. And we use the Ouija board, blah blah blah, and get inside with that and stuff. So
Right. And just using, a sweet little kid as a conduit. Awesome. Love that.
yeah. Also with the Captain Howdy thing, she's like, oh, I'm speaking with Captain Howdy. That's also kind of like a reference to her father, because I think her father's name is Howard. So I think calling him Howdy. It's kind of like, oh, it's safe. It's kind of like a father type figure is Captain
That's
Howdy.
interesting.
That's very safe and stuff. I'll talk to this spirit. He's fine. It's just, but it's definitely not who she thought it was. So.
That's interesting, because I mean, and that's also I'm going to use the word trope twice when talking about these next two things, but I don't think that's fair, because I think trope kind of has like a negative connotation, and that's not necessarily what I'm using it as. But when it comes to like asking for entrance into a space or to a person, they always go for like the most harmless, innocent, or the thing that your heart's reaching for, whether it's like a deceased parent or a missing parent, or, somebody you love that's been absent from your life. Like, a surefire way to gain entrance into that space, that person, is to make them reach for it. Mm-hmm. So, can you, real quick, have you seen Talk to Me?
I haven't yet, but I've heard good things about it. I do want to see it, but I've heard good things.
Okay. I'm definitely not going to say anything, but that element is definitely there. Interestingly enough, also about Talk to Me, and I won't give it away, but there is a very specific scene in that film that jarred me so bad. I'm normally, like, when I'm at the movies with my girls, like I go to horror movies with all of like the girls that work in my healthcare unit. We have way too good of a time doing that. So, cool. We always go together, and like, they were kind of teasing me because they were like, you're always having a good time. But this time I was like, kind of like pulling away from them in my chair, like very much just like isolated. It was very evident that I was not having a good time. I can't put enough emphasis on how good this movie is. But if you grew up religious, there is a scene in this movie, I think, that will just absolutely fuck your shit up. And that's what happened to me. And I just like, that scene stuck with me for probably 3 days. And even now, I don't like that I'm having to recall it. Wow. But it was funny because like another one of my friends who also grew up very religious, she grew up Catholic. I was Southern Baptist. So we have a joke, like she calls herself a recovering Catholic, always a recovering Catholic. And I'm always a recovering Southern Baptist. So she texted me because she had seen it too. And she just goes, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." So it was just kind of like a moment. And like, we didn't talk about it too much, but we both intrinsically knew what scene it was and how kind of scary it was for somebody that had been brought up with the knowledge that like, hey, that scary thing that you just saw, that's going to be you if you don't, like, get on your knees and bow your head, kind of a thing. It's very oppressive. But so that's another like example of just like using, that wrestle with good and evil and spirituality, and that would just, there's a certain like percentage of the population that's going to be even more traumatized than somebody that did not grow up with that kind of thing being told from the time they were a little kid that this is real 100%.
Oh yeah.
So there was that, and then what other thing was I? Oh, like I said, I'm going to use the word trope. I don't mean it like that because I just think that has a negative connotation. That's not how I mean it. But it's always interesting to me how it's the person that's either in the process of losing their faith or the person who is very adamant and outspoken of the fact, like, no, I'm done. Like, I don't believe in this shit anymore. Mm-hmm. That is the person that we all trust. And I think it's because it's like the assumption is that they've grappled with all the hard questions and it's so honest and it's so genuine, as opposed to somebody who is just sitting on their high horse and they're so perfect and wonderful that they've never questioned anything. And even if they are questioning it, they're never going to tell you because they're too, like, you know, consumed with that image of perfection and that image of I have my shit together. So I think it's another character that I think perfectly embodies that was Mel Gibson in Signs.
Oh yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah, great movie. But also like the same thing, right? Like he goes to the pharmacy at one point and that girl asks if he can listen to her, and he's just like, look, I don't do this anymore. But it's interesting, like, they're like shedding, like kind of like rending their garments of, their faith, but yet that's the character that we kind of listen to and trust more so than all of the other ones. Mm-hmm. And I found that so interesting, and it's even true in my own life because I feel that way about my dad. Right. I don't ever kind of want to come on a podcast and talk about how I was a preacher's daughter and ever make it seem like he is not one of my best friends. And like any struggle that we ever had growing up is just something that I recognize as generational. So like he and my mom in some instances didn't even have a fighting chance. So I am a preacher's daughter. Yes. Did I sustain trauma from that? That was like in a very spiritual nature. Yes. But my dad is that character. He's the one you would trust.
Right. Yeah, definitely understand that.
Also, like all of the, the scene where, as a viewer, you're outside the room and you come in and Reagan is stabbing herself in the genitals with a crucifix.
Oh yeah, that's a scene there.
I can see how that would be, a little dramatic for just
it's like the ultimate blasphemy. I love that. It's like the true, like, fuck your religion, like literally fuck you, fuck me Jesus or whatever, like fuck your religion there, like ultimate blasphemy. Sure. It doesn't get more blasphemous than that.
So many of the quips from, the demon and just, what was it? Answer the question, Father Paranoia. That's still a quote that I use to this day because it's just super funny. But yeah, and I love the kind of like what Friedrich used. And I don't know, you ever wonder like sometimes like how intentional something was when, the exorcism is being performed. So like the first time that she projectile vomits onto
it was on Father Karras.
Yes. Yeah. First time she projectile vomits onto him, he's kind of like, really jarred by that. When she projectile vomits onto, the other priest, he just kind of like reaches up and just washes it off his glasses, kind of like, yeah, that was really entertaining. Moving on.
Also with that scene there was a fun fact about that when she did like do her first like projectile vomit on Karras or whatever, she was supposed to get him on the shirt and ended up getting him in the face. So he was actually kind of pissed off about that. And so that reaction was kind of real. That was a real reaction. He didn't expect that. It was supposed to go, on his shirt. But whatever device they were using, it was some type of thing that shot like, pressure. And then the pea soup mixture that he used for the vomit and stuff hit him straight in the face. He did not like that.
I really love that. There's so many, because I've been on set too, and there's so many things that happen that weren't supposed to or whatever that become just kind of like, either inside jokes among like crew or, it's funny. I love stories like that so much, but it's funny that he got mad. Oh, and then like one of the other, because like I said, there was just so many things that this girl said that were just like such shock value. Like, and again, I'm not meaning that disparagingly. I think it was very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that there's that famous line of "Your mother sucks cock in hell, you faithless swine, Karis." I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, ooh, that one was like, even as you know, I can drop an F bomb or two here and there, and even I was just like, I kind of clutched my pearls a little bit. I was just like, damn.
It's creative, that's for sure.
It
Super
was,
creative.
and especially it's like, because if that's the target and that's who she's trying to, or that's who the demon's trying to weaken. Like, I mean, that would, like, how dare you speak of my mother that way, you know? So,
Right.
um, and I can't, to be a little bit honest, I can't tell if, and again, just referring back to things that are intentional or subconscious, I can't tell if Father Karras feeling kind of weak in his own faith was one of the things that made him more susceptible to the demon, or if it's, and maybe more susceptible in those moments where he's crying because it's showing him his mom and all of those kinds of things. But I feel like in any religion and any myth and any, like, when you're talking about self-sacrifice and selflessness, obviously like the ultimate selfless thing to do would to be ask a demon to come into you and murder you so that you can get it out of a child, right? So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately by the end, like, clearly his faith or his own strength of character was strong enough that he did that.
Yeah.
So it's like, did the demon win or did he not, right?
Yeah, I thought, he thinks he won, the priest does. He's like, all right, yeah, I got him entrapped in me. I'm going to jump out this window, kill myself. I can stop him from going any further with anybody. But I think, I think really in the end, I think the demon ended up winning, because
Right.
pretty sure he probably just, went to somebody else, and that's how you get the sequel and everything else like that. But he thought he was going to win. He was like, it's kind of a redemption thing for the priest. And also at the very end too, where he's getting his like last rites or whatever when the other priest comes up to him and holds his hand and stuff like that. It's kind of like he found his faith again.
Exactly. Yeah. um there was another thing when they did the angiograms that they did looked so scary, and I don't ever
Oh yeah.
remember seeing an angiogram ever look that scary before. There's so many things about, like, modern medicine that I'll watch an older movie sometimes and just be like, oh, God bless advancements. Because yeah, I mean, the snapping shots of them getting photos of her brain, I was just like,
Yeah, that was rough. Supposedly
it
a lot of
was.
people passed out when this was in theaters because of that scene there, especially when the blood was like gushing out of her throat and stuff. And they're like, people
Yes.
couldn't handle that shit.
What's funny is that anytime like a report comes out like that where it's like, oh yeah, people were passing out and getting scared and running into the streets, I kind of balk at that a little bit,
Hmm.
just because I'm like, how like, just, okay, I say this loosely, please don't get mad, audience, stop being that fragile.
Right.
However, I think, medical procedures are a reality for everybody. And that one actually made a lot of sense to me, because, I even watching, when them putting, the needle and having to, like, arrange all that equipment to do what it's supposed to. I definitely, I could kind of feel it in my own neck a little bit. So I think that one actually made sense to me. And I was just like, okay, I was like, that's something that if you had never seen that procedure before, or if you're not familiar with it, or if it's something that was like very jarring to you, because again, like, the age of information wasn't as available to us then as it was now. Like, you can probably go watch an angiogram right now if you really wanted to on YouTube,
Right.
but that was probably the first time that anybody was kind of seeing that, and they did a very good job. So I was just like, yeah, I can see how that would have been very visceral for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal to watch even now. Like the effects were great, and yeah, I was like, man, that makes me hurt a bit.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I just, like, almost feels like, I don't know if what I've kind of talked about this a little bit. There's something neurologically, and it's kind of debated, but sometimes I get annoyed with the debates because I'm like, I have it. It's called mere touch synesthesia. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
So it's like this weird phenomenon where you can see something happening to somebody else and you will then feel it in your own body.
I've had that happen before to myself, actually. Like I can, like, oh man, I can feel that. Say if somebody like gets, kicked really hard or like gets cut, and like, I can, but not all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Just sometimes I can kind of feel that.
for sure. I think there's probably like varying degrees of it. I personally there's only certain times I have it, like the area that I have it on pretty much constantly. When I first performed my own cuts during autopsy,
Mhm.
when I did the Y incision, when I sliced through this person's, umbilical region through their belly button, I immediately felt just like all of this twinging, stabbing pain in my own. It
Mhm.
was so crazy. I was just like, and I cannot watch somebody touch their own belly button for whatever reason. Mine's like very localized to that area.
Mhm.
But when it came to Reagan getting, the angiogram, like when they were messing around with her and putting all the needles like in her, I I feel like an idiot because I want to say that that's in the it's just because it's a collection of like dyes so that they can
Mhm.
see an x-ray. And I okay, so I know it's a catheter. I can't remember like if it's specifically blood vessels, veins, artery. So in order to not talk out my ass, I'm not going to say like which specific thing it was because I don't know. But when they were sliding that in there, I swear, and I don't know why I felt it in my eye. Just like I felt like pressure in my eye watching that happen to her. So I feel I definitely just kind of understand why, people were not having a good time watching that in the theater.
Yeah, and a lot of time too, when you hear like, oh, people are crying and leaving the movie theaters, that's just kind of hype, to hype up the film a little bit. I've never seen that in person at a movie theater. I've seen people laughing and kind of wincing and stuff. Like, I was watching, what was it, House of a Thousand Corpses in the theater, and I did
Yeah.
see some people like, oh man, oh fuck, like screaming and stuff, but not to the point where they're like running out the movie theater scared or anything like that. So,
I
but
think that's
sure it happens with some people,
Yeah,
but
I think that's my hesitation too, because I have those same exact experiences that you just described, because I mean, you and I are horror lovers. Like, we see a lot of movies in theater, and I've never seen somebody leave. Like,
no.
maybe it's just because we're so engrossed in our own experience, which I guess is ideal, but I've never seen somebody puke. I've hardly seen somebody even scream, to be honest. I will say it was kind of interesting because like a lot of the ways that people cope with like being very, very jarred or alarmed is to try to be funny. And I see that happen a lot in theaters where like, you'll have some guy with his girlfriend like scoffing at the screen or something because he's like, I'm not afraid of ghosts.
Oh yeah, and then start doing like he starts laughing. Oh, this is so funny, but then deep inside he's scared as shit.
Yeah, deep inside he's like, I'm gonna go home and snuggle with the teddy bear that mom gave me when I was 2. So I've definitely seen a lot. One of the things that I thought was so impressive about Talk to Me, everybody was deathly silent. There
Hmm.
was some jumps here and there, but I mean deathly silent. That was one of the first times I've ever experienced that
Hmm.
in a horror movie to date. That was kind of cool actually, because I'm like everybody, and I was having very much like my own experience with it. Like I said, I wasn't as engaged in terms of like, being snuggly and eating popcorn with my girls. I was definitely just kind of like isolated and pulled into myself, kind of panicking a little bit. So
Hmm.
that was a really cool thing to see. I was like, I've never seen a whole entire audience just scared into silence yet.
Yeah, I've only experienced that a few times in a theater, like where everybody's like genuinely like, we're all like focused and like quiet and not really scared, just really intense focus. But a lot of theaters I attend or whatever too fucking loud. You got people doing stupid shit, and you can't really pay attention to the film. So I'm not a big fan of the local theaters, unfortunately, around me.
Oh, I completely agree. I also live in like a really rural area, and like that's not a fun experience to have. Is like going like and you're trying to like consume something or in like an artistic way, or as somebody who's in love with the genre, and you have Tweedledee and Tweedledum making commentary, and nobody fucking asked for that.
Right.
However, psychologically, it is funny to me because I'm just like, are you like terrified? Your only choice is to just act like an idiot. I do find that part kind of amusing because I'm just like, I think you're a lot more scared than you're letting on.
I remember there's a time I got to see The Exorcist outside. This was like many, many years ago. I was during Halloween. They were doing an outside viewing of The Exorcist, like a big ass fucking like drive-in style situation that had set up behind the movie theater. And
Dope.
that shit was so badass. It was a full moon that night, or close to a full moon. It was Halloween. We're watching Exorcist outside. There's a creepy energy around everybody out there, like especially some of the younger people who have never seen The Exorcist before. Like their reactions were like priceless. But I got to say that's probably like the best viewing I've ever had of The Exorcist was outside on Halloween. Fucking badass.
That's a miraculous way to consume The Exorcist.
Hmm.
I One of the things that I think is kind of cool about it is the fact that how some, and when I say age well, I just special effects and desensitization or something that happened as horror and the technology used to shoot it, produce it has like advanced somewhat, that a lot of these older films kind of like feel like in some ways they maybe don't hit as hard as
Hmm.
they do now, but that's just that it's never a problem, I feel like, with The Exorcist, which I think is so cool. It's just it's definitely a film from the 70s, duh, but
Hmm.
it's still like all of those visceral elements, like because of the storytelling and because of like all of those emotions that he targeted so perfectly, are very much there. So I think that's why it kind of stands like it's lasted and it still has the same effect. I think it's so cool because like not every film I think can say that.
No, and like you said, it definitely holds up, especially all the practical effects. The makeup work by Dick Smith is still some of the fucking best ever, especially when it comes to the old age makeup. Like, Father Marin, he was like portrayed to be like in his 80s or something in this, maybe a little bit older, like a 90-year-old, but the actual actor was only, I think it was like 41. It was Max von Sydow. I'm probably pronouncing the last name wrong there, but he's been in a ton of shit. But yeah, he was only actually at 40 something years old. And Dick Smith, like his makeup work is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and then using Mercedes McCambridge as the voice of the
Oh yeah.
demon, just all of that just created like the most wicked combination. Even just like Reagan's eyes, they're so fucking scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're spiritually unsettling, but also just look like jaundice. So you're just like this combination between like, oh, she's very, very, very ill, and also just like there's something else in there.
The original, I don't know if you noticed, I'm sure you have noticed because you probably watch this movie more than once, I'm sure, like I have. But there's like these cut-ins of the actual demon, like smiling and stuff, Zuzu, like the cut-ins throughout the movie, and
Yes,
that's the test makeup that they were using for Regan. That's what Regan was going to look like, but they ended up using that as like the kind of like the cut-ins they were doing there that really adds some like sinister shit to it.
that's ridiculously cool. That's rad. I love that so much. There's so many things too, like, and especially one of the things I actually, so this will tie back into that. I'm glad this came about because I wanted to say this. When Daniel, in his very heartfelt tribute to Friedkin, said that their project didn't get off the ground, that is so common. And I think if you're a lover of film but you've never necessarily like been a part of it, putting together a film is fucking insane, and it's so complicated, and there's so many moving parts, whether you're guerrilla shooting it, whether it's indie, whether it's a studio. It's a nightmare, like constant existential crisis throughout the entire process. Things go wrong all the way throughout, and it'll either become like a beautiful piece of art that you can all hold each other and cry about, or it'll fizzle out, never become anything, or the project itself never even gets into a phase where it can be like developed. And that's so common, and it's fine. It's just name of the game. And I don't like the thought of like somebody reading that and thinking anything wrong occurred. Right. It's just like, that's what happens. I've had 2 projects completely fail. So, but one of the projects I'm talking about, when we were doing like mock runs, because like it's like a creature feature, so we were trying to like play around with like different things, and we ended up settling like on a Wendigo. Creating that mask was like so much fun. I definitely am still like, what I want to do is like creative production, or being a creative producer, but I won't lie, creating that mask and having to like go through like different pieces of like what I wanted it to look like, or what we were going, it was so fun. There's That's nothing cool. Like starting out with a concept in your head and watching it morph. It's the coolest thing. And even if it's completely different than what you started out as, like it's just so much fun to do. I love that aspect of, production and creating something.
That's awesome, especially dealing with the Wendigo too. That's also badass. I love Wendigo horror films, and there's a few good ones out there too. So
there is, yeah. We were kind of hoping to join that, subgenre, but later. Yeah. But yeah, like it was kind of a combination of like between that and then a Skinwalker, and I think moving forward, I think a Skinwalker is a lot easier to have like and develop if you're a micro production with like no money, which is very much hello me. Right. So, because there's a lot you can do with a Skinwalker versus with a Wendigo, you definitely do need some pretty iconic imagery for it to be like a Wendigo.
Yeah, totally. That's a big ordeal for sure.
Yeah.
I had another cool fact here about this movie.
Please throw the facts.
This is a really cool one. This Pantera's 1992 album, A Vulgar Display of Power, was named after the demon's reply when Father Karras asked him, "Why can't you make the restraints disappear?" To which the demon replies, "That's much too vulgar a display of power." I'm like, that's fucking badass.
That's rad. That was like just a really cool quote, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, yeah. I loved that. Just the shit talking from this thing, right? Just, yeah. I mean, and you can't tell in certain times, like one of my favorite things that he did when he was, crafting these dialogues is just, I cannot tell if this thing is bluffing or if it's legit. And I loved that just horrific confusion I had the whole time. I was like, I cannot tell if this thing is like just a weakling or if it's just playing with its food, like cat plays with a mouse right before it's just like going to like, completely demolish everybody.
Right. And that's kind of what was going on. Definitely kind of playing around. Like you saw towards the end, like the power the demon had, like the restraints weren't shit, just rose up out the bed and stuff. And yeah, all shit broke loose then. So yeah, definitely playing around, because I said the intended target was Karras, and once it was like, all right, I'm able to scoop in on him right now, so it's time to like reveal myself or whatever. So reveal my power, and definitely did.
That's rad. Yeah, that's such a cool element, and one of the elements that I loved about. I won't lie to you, I have like a very love-hate relationship with the Conjuring universe.
Yeah, I love the first film, and the second one is cool, but everything after.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with I don't have any respect for Ed and Lorraine Warren as
Mm-mm.
human beings. So I
Charlatans.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? That's like kind of what I said earlier. Like I'm terrified of charlatans, and like one of the reasons, I mean, they seek to exploit your ignorance. That's the only thing they're there for, is to exploit your ignorance for personal gain.
Hmm.
And if you're somebody who was a very, very like rubber to the road, I only believe in things that can be proved through scientific inquiry, and I only accept things that are factual, real, things I can see, things I can touch, those kinds of things. Um, Especially as somebody who like had spiritual trauma, when you later have an experience where that's all jarred for you in a very real way that it can't be duplicated, and I can't prove it to anybody, so all I have is my word, my feelings, and my experiences as how they relate to other people's that I also respect. I think
Hmm.
we should all be like, those of us that have had that should all be, I think, even more on guard when it comes to people trying to take something that's like more or less, I feel like, kind of sacred a little bit, just in the sense that there's only a select few of the population that may ever get to experience these things for whatever reason, be it empathy, whatever, that are just going to fake it and then later be called out for it, and then they're going to make the rest of us look like complete fucking idiots. And I have so much disdain for somebody that's willing to do that.
Right. Same here.
So yeah, it's just like, I loved the what Ed and Lorraine Warren are like in our fantasies when it comes to like, who they are in The Conjuring.
Yeah.
It's so cool to think that there is a couple that exists like that out there, that are just that like gentle, like, I mean, Mia Farmiga is such a gentle, warm character all throughout. Like, I want to tell her my life story kind of a thing. Like,
Right.
that's how powerful that character is. But like, the idea that that is not who the real Lorraine Warren is, and she, I don't know if you've read a lot of the stuff about Ed Warren when it comes to like underage girls or anything like that, but the fact that that's who that couple is in comparison to who they're portrayed on screen as is like, it hurts me, and it's hard for me to like get lost in it again the way I was when I saw the first one.
Yeah.
Um, but the exorcism that is performed in the first Conjuring, on Bathsheba, I think is just like, I don't know how they were able to make that seem so frightening but also so warm at the same time. Does that make sense?
Right. It does. Yeah.
Because it's just like two people that just give that much of a shit,
Hmm.
which is rare. People generally, in a lot of ways, just don't give a shit. And a lot of it's human nature, and we're all out to protect our own and our own assets and whatever. But it's just like, any time that you ever meet somebody whose kind of first instinct it is to just like, break themselves for someone else, number one, I guess definitely try never to make them feel used by you, but also just, those are the people you need to protect. And I loved like the ability to showcase like a horrifying like phenomenon like an exorcism, but also just like just the romance between the two of them, and the love they have for people around them, and for protecting people, clear up to like keeping like just horrific artifacts in their own home,
Hmm.
locked away from the world, because that's how much they want to protect other people.
Yeah. It sucks that they're like horrible real life people, but in the Conjuring universe, they're kind of like mythic heroes almost, But, real life is usually always worse than fantasy. Well, yeah, most of the time.
Well, yeah, that's, yeah, hilariously enough, yeah, because like I
Oh,
said, with the exorcism with my brother, it's like the most horrifying thing about that exorcism, there was definitely horrifying noises happening, all of that, noises that terrified my siblings, my little brothers, but the scariest part about that was that there's a 16-year-old kid who desperately needs a psychiatrist and needs medication and needs to be held for an evaluation because he is clearly a danger to both himself and other people. But the adults in the room didn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, the exorcism aspect of it made it far more traumatic than it needed to be. So we can definitely kind of capitalize on that, But yeah, the saddest part about that was like there was a sick person who needed help. He's not crazy. He's just, one of the unfortunate among us. And there's many who have a chemical imbalance. And when that's not balanced, it's very bad for primarily him, but, the people who love him. And so it's just like, that's the scariest part about that, was all the people that were supposed to protect him didn't do it.
Right. Yeah, that's the horrible part. I had another cool fact too to kind of go along with what we're saying here. What kind of deals with some possible real exorcist type stuff, but not really. I don't think so. But anyways, Peter Blatley based his novel on a supposedly genuine exorcism from 1949, which was
Yes.
partially performed in Cottage City, Maryland. And see here, it was on a 13-year-old boy who was supposedly possessed by a demon. His name was Robbie, and that ordeal lasted for more than 6 weeks. And yeah, that's pretty brutal.
It is
6 weeks of an
brutal.
exorcism.
Yeah, and you know what's so funny about that to me too is like, and it's funny like the different things that you hear based on where your psychology is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So me as a medical professional, I hear that and I'm like, okay, cool. They tortured a mentally ill child for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to tell me that when I was younger, when I was still very much entrenched in the faith and very much a believer myself, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, an exorcism happened and he was demon possessed for sure. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's so interesting. Like perception is so fascinating to me sometimes.
Yeah, and like you said there, to me, that's 6 weeks of torture there, instead of getting the kid real help. So that's pretty horrific.
What was the time frame of that?
That was back in 1949.
Okay, I cannot remember. I think like one of the OG bipolar drugs is lithium. So I can't, like, forgive me, I'm not totally sure when that was a thing, but it's just like, okay, cool. So you're gonna just for conversation's sake, I'm just gonna say cool. So there was a 13-year-old boy who probably needed a little dose of lithium. And you just tortured him for 6 weeks, probably tied to a bed, right? Because at some point, like, I don't know how, like, when you are in desperate need of help and you're trapped in your own brain, because a lot of the times that's what, being mentally ill feels like, especially because it's just like, how are you supposed to communicate your imbalance to somebody when there's not a whole lot that you can see of it really physically, right? Like, thankfully now we have like positron emission tomography, we have MRIs, more neurological studies that have come out, but even now it's still so misunderstood. So it's just like, so back then, how are you supposed to explain how you're feeling to somebody who's probably also entrenched in a very archaic way of thinking? And like, I can't even imagine how scary that would be. Like, that's how ice pick lobotomies were a thing. It's just hey, I've cured them. Nope, you didn't cure them. You just scrambled their brain and disabled them forever. And the reason that feels cured to you is because you don't have to deal with it anymore. So it's so sad to me. I just like the way that mentally ill people are, what feels like you're just going to be like forever treated like, is just, it's so sad to me. And it's even rampant in healthcare. Like, I'm going to be like really tight-lipped about this. I'm just going to talk about it kind of like in a generalized way. There was a person who came to a facility that I am employed at, and immediately, and the only reason I say immediately is because I have very personal experience with it that started from when I was like very young adolescent with, my brother being diagnosed as bipolar. I have other members of my family that have like schizophrenia, those types of things. So it's something I'm passionate about and something I care very much about. Something, unfortunately, even before I asked to, had to get used to what it looked like. So immediately talking to her, I just like, this is a very manic person, right? Person who's experiencing one of the swings of bipolar disorder. And sometimes you can have them like you're a more manic bipolar person or you're a more depressive bipolar person. In really severe cases, you have both extremes. It's incredibly devastating, and it's hard to watch somebody go through that.
Right.
But the immediate response of somebody who's vastly more educated than me and should have been more aware was like, ooh, she's a little crazy. I fucking hate that word. I just like, it's such a useless phrase to just toss at somebody, especially somebody who's hurting and needs your help. So but like, positive thing, we were able to get person the help that they needed, and that's all that matters. However, it's frustrating in, the year of 2023, you hear all of these like old stories about how we used to treat mental illness, and it's just like we're still not that great at it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely
Yeah.
not. And now, speaking of like mental illness stuff and exorcisms, there's a reality show I saw that's on Max that deals with like real life exorcists. Now they have their own fucking reality show, so it's pretty horrible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I just ooh. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is like, and I think we kind of talked about this on the last podcast we did together. We were talking a little bit about like, politics and how it kind of pertains to like the Marvel universe a little
Oh yeah.
bit. But the art imitating life, life imitating art, you know, exorcisms are immensely fun to watch portrayed on television, movies, but it's just like, it's so irresponsible sometimes for people to just ascribe, just demons and all of these things to somebody who genuinely just needs your help and needs somebody to listen. That's sad to me. And it's just like, I don't, like I said, having personal experience with it, growing up with people who had mental health issues, pretty severe ones, and also like simultaneously in a house that was very religious, it could almost dismiss some of those symptoms as demons talking. Is psycho shit. Like, it's nothing that you want to ever perpetuate or like, put onto somebody. And like, I'm very sad it happened to my brother. I don't want that kind of thing to ever happen to anybody else. So that sucks. It's just, I mean, even Father Karras says in order to perform an exorcism, I'd have to go back to the 16th century.
Yep.
So, and that was in 1973. What the hell are we doing that in 2023?
Good rating.
Like,
Bullshit.
yeah.
I'm an avid sleepwalker, and I used to have night terrors. I still have night terrors here and there. And when I was a kid, I had a really bad one at my aunt's house, and my uncle is from Mexico. He's Spanish, and he swears that I was possessed or cursed by a witch, a bruja. He even told me how to look for the signs if you are cursed or possessed by like a witch or whatever, like a bruja.
Right.
There's supposed to be like these bruises in your thigh area, like on both sides, your left and right leg, upper thigh. There's like bruises there, and if you have those bruises there, that means you've been cursed.
Right. And it's
like,
so
ooh,
weird. It's
okay.
so weird too. Like I said, the automatic need, I think, of like spiritual communities to just demonize the paranormal is very. Did I say spiritual communities? I meant like more so fundamentalist evangelical communities. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a spiritual person at all. But I think, again, like when you just adhere to doctrine, and for some reason those doctrines are just like so quick to demonize, paranormal or, things outside of our knowledge. And it's weird too. There's like a matrilineal aspect to people that like are able to, like I said, clairvoyance is such a difficult word for me. So just people who are sensitive to those kinds of things. Before I was very scared to ever bring up my experiences, but when I finally did, like the first time I ever brought it up was to Daniel on that podcast. But I later found out that like my mom kind of has them here and there. My grandma did, my great grandma, and now my little sister is starting to have them.
Mm.
So I found that very fascinating, and they're nothing you have any control over. Interestingly enough, like no one in my family, or no, let's put it this way, no one in my family, or no one that I place the weight of belief in, has ever kind of come even a little close to telling me that like, yeah, this is, something I have control over. It's very spotty, and it's very, it just happens here and there. Even things that are some of my more recent experiences that have been bizarre to me. And what's so funny is like, I don't think about this as like possession of any kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's probably somebody out there that would say, oh, that sounds like possession. I had two instances where, so somebody close to me had like sent me a work email or whatever, and we were like responding about documents back and forth. So I requested something from her. She sent it to me, and I typed back to her, "Thanks, doll," like DOLL.
Right.
I understand that that's like a phrase, that's a very common phrase that people use. I understand that, like I've heard it used. It's fine. I've never had any desire to call somebody doll.
Right.
And even as I typed it out, I went, that was weird. I've never said that before. First time for everything. Sent the email, didn't think of it. That next Monday, I got a response from her saying, "Oh my God, that's what my grandma used to call me, and I was missing her so, so much."
Mm.
Just in that very time frame that you sent that email to me. And I, it was cool. And then it happened again later with somebody else where I'm very close with this person, and we've talked at length, about dad and how much she misses her dad.
Mm-hmm.
But she has never told me like little tiny specific things about like this very specific nickname that he used to call her. I'd never heard her say that before, ever.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, and the best way I can describe it, both with that email and with saying this name to her, it's almost like, have you ever had a kid tug on your shirt?
Yeah, definitely.
So it doesn't necessarily feel like the shirt tug, but that same urgency that like a little kid trying to get your attention, tugging on your shirt or grabbing, or like, an adult in like an adult situation, if they were to like grab you by the collar of your shirt and pull you close, it doesn't feel like that, but it's that sense of urgency too. I have to say this. And so I said it to her, and she burst into tears and told me like, that's no one has ever called me that. Like, that's very unique to just my dad and I. And I found that those experiences, thankfully, like were very warm feelings. Right. So, but just like, it just makes me wonder sometimes, where I'm just like, I don't understand like the need to demonize things like that, or the need to, why do we have to explain them into oblivion? Why can't we just let them be things that they are?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think all of us are just completely fascinated with, life beyond life as we know it, like what happens to you when you pass away. And to just make it as simple and as boring as heaven and hell, I think is just kind of atrocious.
Yeah, it's pretty lame.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty fucking lame.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to tell you, because it hit me so hard in a very positive way. How did you get Midnight Mass Mike Flanagan vibes from the opening of The Exorcist?
Let me think. Midnight Mass. Kind of, sorta. Yeah. I think I'm thinking Mike probably borrowed a bit from The Exorcist, but yeah.
I loved it, and like I love something like, because Midnight Mass is a fucking masterpiece, and it's amazing, and I love anytime, growing up the way I did, anytime somebody's able to speak to that part of me, which is why my brother, the one who had to protect the baby brother from all of the chaos in the other room during the exorcism, it's why he loves Mike Flanagan so much too. And a lot of his writing very much reminds me of Mike Flanagan's, just because you can see the grappling with just like the upbringing and like the religion and juxtaposing it to what I was taught to believe or what is widely accepted versus what like I'm thinking reality is and that kind of thing. But I love whenever a director is able to like just like paint this beautiful love letter or like love portrait to another director through a film without even coming remotely close to ripping them off. It's the sweetest thing. And all art like derives from other art, right? It's what inspiration is and those kinds of things. So I loved that. I loved feeling Flanagan in The Exorcist and feeling Friedrich in Midnight Mass. I thought that Friedkin in Midnight Mass. I thought that was really cool.
That is cool. And yeah, I can definitely see that. And, I'm sure Flanagan has plenty of inspiration from him. And Flanagan is a master of his craft. Midnight Mass is a perfect fucking miniseries. And he's got I think The Fall of the House of Usher comes out in a month or two that he's doing on Netflix. I think it's Netflix or Amazon. I think it might be Amazon.
Yeah, I vaguely remember something about Netflix not working out, which is not surprising to me, but that's fine.
I'm totally looking forward to that. Like I'm a fan of pretty much everything he's done. He's got a big Stephen King vibe to him. Like Midnight Mass seems like it would have been an awesome Stephen King novel, and it wasn't, which is crazy. Like this feels like a King novel, which is a really good thing.
Right. Yeah. King had a couple comments about Friedkin too, kind of just in opposition to his desire to not necessarily be seen as like a horror director. And again, anytime I think, like I said, I'll just keep reiterating this because I think it's very true. Is like anytime I feel like, number one, I do completely understand the desire to not be pigeonholed. I think everybody has that, whether you're a musician, film director, writer, any of that. Being pigeonholed kind of sucks. And it feels like you're one-dimensional. But I vehemently express my understanding of that. However, the way that we use the term horror versus the way that they are seeing the term horror, I think are two completely different things. And I think it's a badge of honor. I don't think it's something to shy away from or to freak out about. I just think it's you exploring deeper, more visceral questions of humanity than any other genre is sometimes capable of doing.
No,
especially the grief aspect, because grief is the thing that everybody is terrified of. I mean, like I think I mentioned it in another podcast, but there's literally a heart defect that comes from being in the throes of very traumatic grief, and it can kill you. It has. So it's not, grief is nothing to minimize.
Right. You're totally right with that. I wanted to give a couple recommendations out to some of Friedkin's not less noteworthy work he's done. There's a couple films here, but The Guardian, which was it traumatized me as a kid when this came out, because you're dealing with a tree nymph or whatever. I didn't know it was a nymph back then. I saw it was like a tree monster that was babysitting this kid. Fucking terrified me.
Right.
But the Guardian from 1990 is really fucking good, and I don't think he really gets too much credit for this like he should. But that one's out there to rent on Amazon. It's not streaming anywhere, unfortunately. That's a really good one. And also Cruising, which is on HBO Max right now. Cruising's fucking killer. Yeah. And then the last, I think it was the last season of American Horror Story was really, really strongly influenced by Cruising, with a lot of stuff that was going on in that. And Cruising's fucking great. It's dark and gritty and pretty nasty and stuff, with serial killer stuff. It's just like that old school New York look. Is all gritty and shit. It's fucking cool as hell. But I think those two films, did a double feature of those two, I think that'd be a pretty killer
Friedkin was
night.
actually a really big true crime junkie. and not in the way that like a lot of people are either. Like sometimes I
Right.
hate that phrase because it's just kind of like I find a lot of people who like use the term "I'm a true crime junkie" to be kind of callous sometimes about the way they speak of, you know, crimes perpetrated by really monstrous people and like kind of not giving as much attention to the victims as they probably should.
Right.
But Friedkin was a true crime junkie in like a expert intellectual way I geek out over the fact that he shared that love with me. But he had the French Connection too, is another, that's a 1971 film, very very good. Yeah. So yeah, he
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was saying he also did one too. I didn't know anything about. I've seen it a bunch of times. I didn't know it was him because this is back in the day when I saw this. But he did a really killer movie. It's like an action. It is an action movie, but it was called I think it's called The Hunted, I believe. That came out in 2003, and it's a great fucking action thriller, and it's got Benicio del Toro, who I'm a big fan of and stuff, and that's another good one. Like he's done so much good shit, and he's done a variety of things, you know, from horror to thrillers to he's done some like documentary style films like Tales from the Crypt. I mean, it's pretty brilliant director.
Yeah, no, completely agree, and you know, would definitely. Daniel saying he's one of the greatest directors that ever lived. Like, I mean, fair. Like he's,
Oh yeah.
I think, you know, just because he's the most well known for Exorcist, for The Exorcist doesn't mean that he didn't, like, he's a very well-rounded filmmaker, and he's not just like a one-trick pony. And I think that's one of the things that maybe being pigeonholed as a horror director was the thing that he found alarming. So yeah, like if you can watch all these other movies like The French Connection, Cruising, Sorcerer, The Hunted, definitely just kind of dive in, because, you know, sometimes you become famous for something, and sure, that's the thing you're famous for. It's like there's tons of other aspects about you as a human being. So it's, yeah, I would definitely try to watch a lot of his other things, because I think it'll give you a greater perspective on him as a film director and not just as the director of The Exorcist, you know.
Yeah, you get to see all the other sides of him and stuff, and it's very diverse.
Yeah, and even like, ironically enough, the a little bit of his true crime loving self comes out in The Exorcist, because, like, you know, there's a murder mystery in the midst of, you know, the battle between good and evil and spirituality. So yeah, he's a definite fan of, you know, true crime and criminology and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, 100%. You can definitely tell an Exorcist, and also with the novel that was written or whatever. The novel itself is kind of more of a procedural type, like cop detective type thing. You know, it's not near as horrific as the actual film itself. It's, you know, it's more procedural. It's
right.
So it's kind of dry compared to the film. Still really good though, but in a different way. But yeah, it's definitely got some crime feel shit going on there.
That definitely made sense. And I feel like, honestly, even though, and I've never spoke to the man personally, obviously, so I don't want to speak for him or anything, but, you know, I think him just creating more sort of in your face elements based off of something that was very dry and practical and clinical, just speaks to him as an artist. But like, possibly, you know, him being even drawn to that book in the first place was because of the crime aspect.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably definitely what drove him to make this film after reading the book and stuff. Like, all right, that's up my alley. I'm gonna, you know, I'm so glad he did, because, like I said, it's one of my favorite films of all time, and it still is. And yeah, and also off of this subject here, like, I'm not really looking forward to the new Exorcist films coming out. I mean, they can prove me wrong and stuff. I'm like, I don't know.
I'm looking forward a little bit to being proven wrong. I will say the only thing I have to say, just from the previews, is I did like some of the imagery. Like, it was creepy. I'll give it that.
And these are supposed to be prequels, right? I'm not. I thought it was going to be a remake, but then I'm hearing these are prequels. So I'm a bit. I don't know what's going on
To
there.
be completely honest with you, I have no idea because like
Okay.
just like the phrase Exorcist remake, I just kind of went, well, I don't have to pay attention to that ever again or really.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, you know, when you're held captive in the movies because you're waiting for Talk to Me to come on, then you have to watch the preview. But
Yeah, you're
I
right.
be beyond the imagery, like I don't know anything about it. I mean, I'll give it a shot, but I don't eh. Like I said, the imagery's creepy, but if that's the only thing you have, um, then fuck off because like the ultimate thing that drives any film has to be the story. It can't be any of that other shit. Otherwise, you just have like a very artfully filmed word salad. Nobody wants that.
Right. And if you want to expand your Exorcist universe, I recommend the show that it got canceled back in 2018, but it was the Exorcist TV show that came on Fox. The first season of this show is fucking awesome. Highly recommend it. It's like a retelling of The Exorcist, but in a TV series format, and it's really dark and it's really good. It stands its ground really well. So if you haven't seen that, you should definitely check that out.
Absolutely.
It's
And
on
then
Hulu now, I
if you're
think.
super if you're still confused about Pazuzu and you really need to know more, I think they go in like a little bit more in depth into like Pazuzu like as an entity in The Exorcist 2.
Yeah, you talking about Heretic?
Yes.
Yeah, that's such a bad. I skip between. I go 1 to 3. Those are my favorite of the Exorcist films. Like two
Yeah.
is like it's bad, and it's not even bad in a great way. But yeah, I still recommend at least checking it out. That way you can fall in line with all the films. Like you might dig it. Some people do dig it.
Yeah.
There's somewhat of a cult following, but like the
Yeah.
1 and 3 are the fucking best. Especially 3 is so fucking good.
I did like 3. It's always hard because like sequels and all that is like they're just so rare. Are they ever, either just as good or sometimes better than the first one? But it's just, I mean, like if you're like a diehard fan of The Exorcist, I just think like that is like the solid single place that holds number one in your heart and you can't let go, which I
Right.
identify with. So
Yeah, and another good one too was, well, I wouldn't say good, but decent, and you get some more lore on Light Pazuzu was Dominion, which I think came out in the late '90s, early 2000s. Exorcist Dominion. You remember that?
I do, yeah.
I remember liking it back then. I haven't rewatched Dominion, and there's another one too that came around the same time. I haven't watched neither of those in like years, so I know back then I thought they were pretty cool because they give a little more backstory and stuff, but
Right.
I don't know that they hold up now. So
Some of the backstory reveals on occasion, I think, are, I'm not sure if overkill is the right word. I'm just going to use it this time.
hmm
Because it's just like there's an air of mystery sometimes about not revealing too much
hmm
that I highly respect. It's like you want to write, I feel like, a really fine line between revealing just enough that your audience feels satisfied, but also not so much that they're just like drowning in useless information, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's
Yeah.
pretty
Like,
much that's why Sinister 2 failed so much for me. Sinister 1 was fucking perfection, but the
yeah.
second film, like they went really deep on the Bagul and all his ice stuff and totally ruined everything.
Ex-
less is more with that.
exactly. It's too much. And it's just like, there was a couple scenes I remember that we were talking about when it came to the one that I was trying to develop with the Wendigo, where just like very carefully making sure that you're satisfied with what you're seeing of this thing when you do see it, but not
Hmm.
just like, because that full reveal sometimes is a constant flop. I don't think I've ever truly seen a full reveal and been satisfied. So I think it's just like, unless you are like just like have like this god-given gift to make the perfect monster. I think
Hmm.
the last one I was satisfied with was the freaking werewolf, an American Werewolf in London.
Yeah,
um but yeah, it's just, I don't know, like sometimes full reveals are just such a freaking gamble. So I
really.
think just like, and when I talk about safe, I'm not talking about playing it safe to the point where you're not making art, but safe in a sense that you can play with your audience's imagination and their fear a little bit better by keeping some mystery to it.
I'm totally down with that. Less is more when it comes to horror for me. Like,
Yeah,
shit gets ruined when the whole thing is just like thrown out there at you and doesn't look so well, you know.
exactly. Yeah,
So,
there was like, and especially like when you just like slow tease it, like with like those subtle glimpses of like, oh, disgusting, what the fuck was that kind of a
hmm
thing. Yeah, just like there was a scene, and like I'm just gonna talk about it right now because like it's being completely like rewritten. It's not even the same thing that it was.
hmm
So, but there was one scene that we had written where, they're up in like the mount, like we were filming in Mount Shasta, but you're driving out, like trying to escape these noises that we had kind of like recreated. Like we created these noises with Aztec death whistles that we had out in the woods.
hmm
And there was like this like scene like where like, the main characters are kind of like driving away because they're just like so shocked. And we kind of wanted to make it seem like, sometimes when the behavior of people in horror movies is very different from that of what you would do in real life. Very
hmm
few of us would be Velma and go investigate that. I think most of our instincts would be, that was a threat on my person and I need to leave. So they're driving away and you just kind of see it. But like the only reason that you see it is if you're paying attention to as they're driving and it's just crouched like off on the side of the road, basically just
hmm
watching them leave. So it was just like those kinds of things because I love those moments. Like Hereditary had it when you get like a more of an aerial view of, not aerial, but like a further away view of the house, and you see like a bunch of like naked people in the woods.
Right.
I didn't notice that until the second time that I saw it, and it was horrifying.
Oh yeah.
So I love stuff like that.
Yeah, same here. Like I said, less is more, and that's scarier to me than, just showing all your cards,
Precisely, because I mean, what is like, your fear of the supernatural so much of the time is just the fear of the unknown, period.
Yep,
So it's
exactly.
just, yeah, so it's just like, why would you, yeah, like you said, show all of your cards? It's just
hmm
like, because now my imagination has very little left to play with.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. Well, Jesse, this has been a great talk on one of my favorite films, and a cool tribute and stuff to Friedkin. So I
Yeah,
think this was
just
great.
truly a phenomenal human being from all accounts, especially of like, and accounts of people I think that you and I very much like hold in high esteem. So um, I did not have the privilege to know him personally, but to all of the people who knew him very well, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. And, as much as he didn't like the title, I'm just going to say the horror community, lost another great one. So,
Yes, 100% on that. So, yeah, this was a very fun episode. Like I said, I really enjoyed this, and we'll
I love
definitely,
talking to you about
oh,
anything, but this was rad. So I
yeah, we'll
completely
definitely
agree.
get together and do another episode. We'll figure out something cool to talk about and go with that. So,
For sure. Absolutely. It's really not that difficult to have an interesting conversation with you. So
no,
you're very good at that.
thank you. Yeah, we definitely got good chemistry when it comes to talking horror and film and stuff. So we'll definitely do
Absolutely.
this again. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend and stuff. And we will talk again soon.
You too.